The CEO laughed when she saw the rusty tractor parked outside her company's headquarters, but the laughter died on her lips less than an hour later when she discovered whose hands had built the fortune keeping her entire company alive. What she thought was an embarrassing old machine belonged to the quiet single father who supplied more raw materials to her corporation than any other person in the country. And before the day was over, she would have to face the painful truth that she had judged the man who had been quietly saving her company for years. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you can remain part of our family and our community. The man standing beside that battered tractor was Everett Calloway, a 48-year-old widowed father who owned a sprawling agricultural operation several hours outside the city. His clothes were clean but worn, his boots carried dried mud from the fields, and his hands were rough from decades of work. Everett had never cared much about appearances. His world was measured in harvests, weather forecasts, machinery repairs, invoices, and the laughter of his 14-year-old daughter, Maisie, who was the center of everything he did. After losing his wife, Clara, to an illness years earlier, Everett had learned how to become both father and mother without ever complaining about the weight of it. He worked before sunrise and remained in the fields until the work was done, not because he loved exhaustion, but because every acre represented security for his daughter. His farm produced specialty grains and agricultural ingredients that went into some of the most popular food products in North America. His largest customer was Sterling Vale Foods, a powerful corporation whose headquarters rose above the city like a monument to wealth. For nearly 12 years, Everett had supplied the company through a network of contracts that had quietly grown until his operation became its single largest independent agricultural supplier. Yet the executives at Sterling Vale rarely knew his face. They knew his company name, Calloway Agricultural Partners, and they knew his shipments arrived on time, met every quality requirement, and rarely caused a problem. Everett preferred it that way. He believed good work did not need applause. Sterling Vale's CEO, Marlo Whitaker, believed almost the exact opposite. At 39, Marlo had built a reputation for being brilliant, aggressive, and impossible to impress. She had inherited no comfortable path to leadership. She had worked relentlessly through the company's financial division, eventually becoming chief executive after years of fighting for every promotion. But somewhere along the way, ambition had hardened into arrogance. She had begun measuring people by their clothes, their cars, their titles, and the size of their offices. She considered herself practical, but many people quietly thought she had simply forgotten how to be kind. That morning, Sterling Vale was hosting an important supplier appreciation event in the courtyard outside its headquarters. Executives, investors, managers, and major partners had gathered beneath elegant white canopies. Luxury vehicles filled the parking area, and polished company representatives moved through the crowd carrying tablets and folders. Marlo arrived in a sleek black vehicle and stepped out wearing an immaculate cream-colored suit. Cameras turned toward her immediately. Then Everett arrived. His old green tractor rattled slowly into the edge of the company grounds because the transport truck carrying one of his agricultural machines had broken down on the highway. Everett had driven the tractor the remaining distance so he could deliver a critical sample container before an afternoon quality inspection. The tractor was nearly 30 years old. Its paint was faded, one headlight was missing, and its metal body showed years of repairs. Everett climbed down carrying a simple cardboard case. Several people stared. Marlo stared longer. A young executive standing beside her noticed the tractor and whispered something that made her smile. Marlo looked Everett up and down, then glanced at the machine as though it had personally offended her. She made a dismissive remark about how the company apparently needed to improve its standards for supplier invitations. A few people laughed nervously. Everett heard every word. He could have explained who he was. He could have pulled out the contracts, shown the invoices, and reminded them that his company supplied enough ingredients to keep several Sterling Vale production facilities operating. Instead, he simply lowered his eyes, adjusted the cardboard case in his arms, and continued walking. That quiet reaction should have made Marlo uncomfortable, but it didn't. At least not yet. Everett delivered the samples to the quality department and was preparing to leave when Maisie called him. She had been waiting at home because she had an important school presentation that afternoon. Everett had promised he would be there. He looked at the time and realized he had barely enough time to make the drive. Before he could leave, Sterling Vale's chief operations officer, Graham Mercer, rushed into the loading area with a pale expression. He had just received an urgent call from the company's largest production facility. A shipment of raw materials scheduled to arrive that morning had been rejected because of contamination concerns. Without replacement material, the facility would have to stop production. Marlo immediately demanded to know which supplier could provide emergency stock. Graham hesitated. Then he said the name that made the room suddenly silent. Calloway Agricultural Partners. Marlo's expression changed. She asked how quickly they could deliver. Graham explained that Everett's farm had enough reserve inventory to cover the shortage, but only if Everett approved an emergency release immediately. Marlo turned toward the loading area. Everett was still there. The man she had mocked was the only person capable of preventing the company's biggest production facility from shutting down. Graham hurried toward him, apologizing for the situation and asking for help. Everett listened without bitterness. He didn't mention Marlo's earlier insult. He didn't demand a better contract. He didn't threaten to walk away. He simply asked how much material they needed and how quickly. When Graham gave him the numbers, Everett calculated silently. He could fulfill the order. But doing so meant postponing part of his own farm's scheduled shipments to smaller customers. Everett thought about Maisie waiting for him. He thought about the farmers who depended on those contracts. He thought about how easily a business could collapse when one person decided that helping others was inconvenient. Then he agreed. Marlo watched him from several feet away. For the first time that day, she looked embarrassed. Everett turned to leave, but Marlo stopped him. She tried to apologize, though the words came awkwardly. Everett accepted the apology without making her suffer for it. He simply told her that people often made judgments based on what they could see, while the most important parts of someone's life were usually hidden. That sentence stayed with Marlo. But the biggest surprise came when Graham showed her the Supplier records. Everett wasn't merely an important supplier. He was Sterling Vale's largest independent agricultural supplier by annual volume. His company had supplied ingredients worth hundreds of millions of dollars over the years. He had maintained an almost perfect delivery record. During 2 previous national shortages, his reserve inventory had kept Sterling Vale's factories operating. He had even refused higher prices during one crisis because he knew ordinary families would eventually pay the difference at grocery stores. Marlo stared at the records in disbelief. The man she had judged because of an old tractor had been one of the strongest reasons her company had survived difficult years. Yet Everett had never used that power to demand special treatment. That afternoon, Marlo visited the company's production facility with Everett. The emergency shipment was being unloaded, and workers moved quickly to restart production. Everett stood quietly beside the loading dock, checking quality samples while employees greeted him with genuine respect. Marlo noticed something else. The workers didn't talk about his money. They talked about his character. One employee explained that Everett had personally helped several farm workers during difficult years. Another said he had paid emergency medical bills for a seasonal worker's child. Someone else mentioned that he had donated equipment to a local agricultural school. None of those things had appeared in his company profile. Everett had simply done them because he believed people mattered. Later that afternoon, Marlo finally understood why Everett had rushed away earlier. She learned that his daughter had been waiting for him for an important school presentation. Marlo asked if he had missed it. Everett smiled sadly and admitted that he probably had. The look on his face was different from everything she had seen that morning. It wasn't the face of a wealthy businessman. It was the face of a father who had spent years trying to make sure his daughter never felt abandoned after losing her mother. Marlo asked if there was anything she could do. Everett said there was nothing to fix. But there was something he needed to do. He drove home as quickly as traffic allowed, still wearing the same dusty clothes. When he arrived, Maisie was sitting outside with her presentation board beside her. She had expected him much earlier. Everett apologized. Maisie looked at him for a long moment before smiling and telling him that she knew he would come. Those words nearly broke him. He sat beside her, listened to her presentation, and applauded louder than anyone else could have. Unknown to them, Marlo had followed at a distance after learning where Everett lived because she wanted to understand the man she had so quickly dismissed. She remained near the property long enough to see Everett listening proudly to his daughter. She realized that morning she had been looking at a rusty tractor. But the tractor wasn't evidence of failure. It was evidence of loyalty. Everett kept repairing it because it had belonged to his father, who had taught him that a machine didn't need to be new to be valuable. It only needed to keep serving the people who depended on it. Marlo returned to the city with tears in her eyes. The next morning, she called an executive meeting. Instead of hiding her mistake, she admitted it publicly. She told the leadership team that she had judged a major supplier by his appearance and had failed to recognize the human being behind the contract. She proposed a new supplier recognition program based not merely on financial volume, but on reliability, ethical practices, employee welfare, and community impact. She also asked Everett to help design it. Everett initially refused because he didn't want special recognition. Marlo insisted that the program wasn't about glorifying him. It was about making sure people like him weren't overlooked simply because they didn't look powerful. Eventually, Everett agreed. Months later, Sterling Vale changed the way it worked with independent suppliers. The company created longer-term contracts, emergency support programs, and fairer payment structures for smaller agricultural producers. Marlo became a different kind of CEO, not softer in business, but wiser about people. Everett continued working his farm. His old tractor remained in service. Maisie eventually grew into a confident young woman who studied agricultural science, inspired by the father who had taught her that success was not measured by the shine of your possessions but by the number of people whose lives became better because you were there. One afternoon, Marlo visited the farm again. She found Everett repairing the same old tractor while Maisie worked nearby. This time Marlo didn't laugh. She walked over, rolled up her sleeves, and asked if she could help. Everett smiled and handed her a wrench. The CEO who once thought the tractor was a symbol of poverty now understood that it represented something far more valuable: resilience, history, sacrifice, and love. Years later, when people asked Marlo about the greatest lesson of her career, she never talked about profits, acquisitions, or stock prices. She talked about a rusty tractor. She explained that the most dangerous mistake a person can make is believing that someone's appearance tells you their worth. She said that wealth can hide behind worn clothes, wisdom can speak softly, and the person you overlook today may be the very person who saves you tomorrow. And Everett never forgot the day she learned that lesson. He also never used her mistake against her. Because forgiveness, he believed, wasn't pretending someone had never hurt you. It was refusing to let their mistake turn your heart into the same kind of heart that hurt you. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Before you go, leave a meaningful comment telling us what you believe matters more in life, the way someone looks, the wealth they possess, or the kindness they show when nobody is watching. Because sometimes the greatest treasure isn't parked inside a luxury garage. Sometimes it is sitting in an old tractor, covered in dust, carrying the story of a father who never stopped showing up for the people he loved.